Hmm. Oh, that's cool. They give you the option to walk out if you want. Okay, my name's Lois Brown. Um, I live in Newfoundland. My whole career pretty much been in St. John's, with a couple of years that I spent in Montreal being the exception. I was around when Neighborhood Dance Works started. Was very Kathy Ferry founded Neighborhood Dance Works. She's the chief founder, and she also taught classes at the time. So I also owe a lot of my ideas about crossing disciplines and democratic processes and those kind of things to her. And she's here, which is wonderful. And I'm still making work, but I'm doing more writing. But the writing I'm doing is more about how I work, less fiction and more fact, I guess. I'm going to do a land acknowledgement now, and it's something I'm just working on. It's from an essay called "As If We Were Ghosts: Inhabiting Islandness and Disability." And this is it. The land and seas of Newfoundland and Labrador have been plundered by continental economic policy and industry. Her cultures have been capitalized and policed. Though I'm enmeshed in these histories, I want to meet my larger responsibility to honor the land, sky, and sea, and to honor also my larger community. Do we inhabit the land, or does the land inhabit us? And I know some people would like to be specific about land acknowledgements, and I really invite you to do that before you speak. So now I'm going to pass it over to Lori, and she's going to talk about a little bit about, I think I asked her to, I don't really know what she's going to talk about, but I asked her to talk about pig.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Pig started when Lois and I started a conversation about what we need in the moment. And we're joined at various times by other artists, in particular Andrea Cooper and Sarah Joy Stoker. Other people have participated in PIG. PIG stands for Performance Active Inquiry Group. And it's been a process and continues to be a process, and an engagement in creating spaces for having the conversations we need to have, whatever those are at the time, about our creative process and in community engagement, and how to keep going when things go off the rails in the world or in our own personal worlds. It's about connecting and community, and it's pretty broad. So there've been a number of times that we've that presentation of work in progress has been part of that, and that we've come together in different spaces to share writing, to share reflection, and to share work in process. And then to be able to have to cultivate this environment where there's a discourse around that. And part of it came from being hungry for discourse in a way that people who have more interaction with academic or scholarly communities have in other places, but that because Memorial, where the fine arts program is in Corner Brook, and we've tended to not have that much connection to Memorial University here in our dance work. I'm not going to say too much more, but I just feel like this year, the last couple of years have changed everything because we've all learned to adapt to Zoom and other ways of connecting across distance and across time. And curation and advocacy, I guess, are aspects of our creative engagement that seem to become more and more important. It's certainly for me as I get older and find myself also in a mentoring role with young artists and wanting to create spaces for the artists that I notice need some space to be held for that. So this conversation today will definitely be juicy in that regard. And I'm so thankful that Kathy's able to be here because, of course, Kathy was also one of my first movement teachers outside of the Tutu Parade. And I'm thrilled to that Kathy's part of this conversation, and I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so initially when I had this idea, I thought it deserved two parts, or I thought we would have it all in one, and we'd look at Neighborhood Danceworks history and then kind of talk about the future of curation. But as time went along, it seemed like it was more important to talk about what the next step, what we just recently did, and to maybe even pull a little bit apart COVID and talk about, I don't mean purposely analyze COVID, but just absorb, like be where we are and talk about the next steps, because it seems to me like a hell of a lot has happened. And I for one, don't really, I know a lot happened, but I don't know what it was. And then I thought like next year, which actually it already is next year in terms of Neighborhood Danceworks programming. And I've started in a conversation on email with Kathy, and I'm going to propose some different ways that we could look at what happened when Neighborhood started and really dig into the history. So being born under the astrological sign of Cancer, of course, I'm going backwards and starting with part 2 first. So that's my explanation of like kind of how I went along with this. And it was really important to CALA as well that we provide some kind of discussion about how the virtual residency that Angie led happened in COVID. Neighborhood Danceworks actually did like so much stuff during COVID. It's crazy. I can't even really remember it all. So I also want to say that I canceled or I postponed this first idea, not because I developed it into this second idea that I just told you right now, but because my mom died. My mom died in April, and we didn't expect it, and I was really devastated by it. So here we are now, and we've set up this panel under sort of this, like with a little bit of a different perspective. And my daughter's boyfriend died on Tuesday night. He's only 24, and he died of an accidental overdose of heroin laced with fentanyl. So CALA said, do you want to postpone again? And I just feel like, no, because I know of so many people who've gone through these things during COVID and prior to COVID. And we know we're very familiar with the fact that there's an opioid epidemic, even though it's suppressed. And so many people are dealing also with seniors dying during COVID because it's been such a horrible time for that there's just been a lot more pressure on people's healths. And I also want to, so I want to accept where I am and share it with you, and just take this step against resilience. When we talk about islandness, we often talk about how islands are sometimes and I think you can think of yourself as an island, or any kind of work that you do that's isolated. And because we're a small group, we're so often praised for our resilience. And this becomes a reason for us to put up with what we don't have. And so I guess I'll propose for myself today that I really need more acceptance than I need to praise myself for resilience, even though I am here, so it could be looking like an act of resilience. It's really not at all. It's just an act of acceptance. So I'm going to introduce the panel now, and then we have 3 questions, and I'll put the questions one after the other to each one of them. And we'll go on for like about 45 minutes. And then I want to stop, and we have like so many wonderful people here today, and just open up for a discussion for the second half. Now, whether I'll actually really be able to keep to those times, I have no idea, but I'll give it a shot anyway. So let's see. And there's some additional questions too that I have, so we can keep going around in a circle with the panel. So Kala, who is also the technical person who is operating the Zoom today, thanks Kala, is the artistic director of Neighborhood Dance Works. She is a curator, an arts advocate, an arts educator, and has a deep interest and curiosity around dance. She focuses her energy to question, consider, and guide how we rise up and collectively fulfill the mission of Neighborhood Dance Works, which has expanded over the years. Her vision is to continually examine how dance programming is realized in this province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and how those actions can reverberate to extend the life and impact of an artist's work here and elsewhere. She thinks strategically about building collaborative partnerships and programs that can bring about opportunities for artists and audiences, whether it's through the annual Festival of New Dance, seasonal main stage presentations, artistic exchanges, dance touring, research training, or discourse. Every time I talk to her, she's expanding the programming of Neighborhood Dance Works. And in fact, this is a part of that expansion. She's motivated to cultivate a responsive environment where artist programming is seeded, nurtured, and realized. And I'm just going to add in, because that when she was a young dancer, she liked to dance to bagpipes, and especially loved the swish of the kilt. There's a lot more to say about Kala, but honestly, I'd have to kind of just only talk about Kala. So Nate is an experimental dance theater. Oh, please correct anything when it comes around to your time, or add or whatever to your bios. Is an experimental dance theater and video artist living in Teotaki, who, sorry if am I saying that right? You can correct me. Go ahead.
Jojage.
Jojage, thank you. Who researches queer strategies to create relational choreographic structures, understanding performance as fundamentally a social exchange. His tactile dances attempt to dismantle movement shame by uncorrecting the self-censored body. Nate initiated and curates the residency series This is Actively Built, which brings together queer artists to broach the question, what is queer dance? Within a framework that challenges the classic residency structure, restitching the artist's autonomy to allow a cross-pollination of knowledge and practices. He's a member of the cooperative dance company Je Suis Julio, which develops community-centered alternatives for being a dance artist in the face of an uncertain future of global capitalism and ecological collapse. He's currently co-curator at the Center of Creation for O Vertigo alongside Hanako Hoshimi Keynes. Did I say her name correctly? So this is Angie, who's held a virtual residency through Neighborhood Dance Works programming for this past year when we couldn't, when a number of artists who were programmed, we were unable to have them here on really. So she developed this very amazing, provocative, yet gentle virtual residency. So I'll do my best with your bio here. Dance artist based in Tawaki. Please say that again, because I know I'm mispronouncing it.
Shoshage.
Shoshake. And say this too, Moonyang. Okay, good. Montreal. Collaborative creative processes are the basis of its continuous research into performance. Study the introductory space between creative process and performance and between spectator and performer. The bodily acquired and specific understandings that emerge from this research shape her current questions and commitments, both in her own work and with others. She's also actively involved in conversations about inclusion, diversity, and accessibility in the dance community. It's not just about what we create as artists, but also how we do it. It undertakes to practice consent, respect, and accessibility. So those are our panelists. So our three questions, I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll start with the question 2. What can contemporary residencies, curation, and programming in dance look like? And I'll add in organizing, which was the word that we grabbed from Nate's response to something that I sent out, asked him about. What happened this year and where are we now? And what are the next right steps? So I'm going to start with Kala and ask her what happened this year and where are we now?
Well, a lot happened. Okay. Thank you for asking those questions. I've been thinking about them. And I've been traveling back in time over the last year, thinking about where my mind was, where my body was, and where my heart was at the beginning of the pandemic, to access some information, personal information about the things that I was drawn to at that time in response to what was happening. So I was, like many people, or maybe not like everybody, but I was really glued to the TV for a while and watching a little bit obsessively the news every day about updates. And I was just really trying to make sense of what was happening. And then as someone who works in this industry, I was quickly pulled into Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, talking about what we're going to do. And I instantly, or not instantly, but fairly quickly became rather fatigued with the impositions that I felt were being imposed on organizations to fill the space and to quickly get busy to entertain and to sort of distract people from what was happening, when that was really not an option for us. Like, quickly shifting to a digital reality was not an option. We didn't have the resources, we didn't have the technology, and I didn't want to use energy jumping through hoops to acquire equipment. And I didn't think that was something that would serve us. So one of the things I just kept thinking about, like, is sure, we could do a digital festival, but like, what is the legacy of that? And what's the real impact for people living here to just start putting things up on, more stuff up on the screen? So I really started to tap in more to a sensory experience of what was happening for me, and the sense of isolation and loneliness that I was feeling, trapped in my house with my husband and my son, yet trying to also think outside that small box about what I was craving on a sensory level. And I was almost feeling, not almost, I think I was feeling a very fetal experience. Like, I actually felt almost a kind of desire to be in a womb and to feel a primal energy around who I was as a person, and wanted to find a way to connect with people in a similar way. And I was thinking a lot about the festival artist, because it was looming in the back of my head that I, either had to somehow let all these artists down, that they, the festival wasn't going to go ahead, and, or some dream. But so I just quickly was very drawn to this ideas around creating a different kind of virtual experience that could be more of a healing balm to this this journey that we were on. I actually had a conversation with Ted about some initial ideas, and he introduced me to Angie, whose work I already knew from having traveled to networking events in Montreal, but I had not had a chance really to connect with her in a concrete way. And so just to say that I reached out to her and started to talk about some loose ideas about a virtual residency experience that I was interested in exploring and developing with the leadership and vision and direction of an artist who could guide the work. So I'm not going to talk too much longer, just to say that the discussion for me, so much of what happened, there were a lot of concrete things that we did, and they're on our website. You can go look and see what we did. But I think really a lot of things happened that people can't see. The amount of conversations that I had with artists were tremendous. They took up a huge amount of time. At a certain point, I just started saying no to all the Zoom meetings and all the stuff that people were asking me to come to, whether it was this, one sectoral organization or another. I just started saying no to it, because I felt like I was also then being forced to realize somebody else's kind of checking a box, or someone else's, to show like, these are how many people attended our Zoom meetings during COVID. And I was like, that's not really serving me right now. Like, I did what I had to, and I attended the meetings that I need to get the information I needed. And then I just started saying no. And I started investing my energy into conversations with artists, and in particular, this project, the Virtual Festival Residency. I know it's a very fancy title, but that's what we landed on. It's fine. And we had a lot of rich conversations. And then, but also other projects that were really important to me, like the Grand Active Theater that we did. It was a commission by the NAC, but the thing was collaboration, the discussions, how to work together were hugely important. And yeah, so I was guided by trying to find an inner generosity that allowed something different to happen, that was really more about who we could be in this moment and not what others wanted us to be. And especially not geared to audiences. I actually was not thinking about audiences a lot. I was thinking more about just trying to create a space for the artist to be grounded in a process that would feed them in a way, and thought, you know, if the audience piece comes later, that's great. But for now, I was putting my energy towards the festival artists and then through some other projects. So I'll just stop there because that's probably a lot, and I want to hear what Nate and Angie have to say.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to go to Angie next because it really relates to, because she was activating and leading the virtual residency. So it seems like it's probably a nice way to go to you next, and then we'll come back to Nate. And I guess the question was, what happened this year and where are we now? Or whatever you want to say. But we would love to hear about the virtual residency.
Thanks, Lois. Thanks, Kala. Hi, everyone. So I'm Angie. Not everyone here knows me. I am, as Lois read my bio, based out of Tiohtià:ke, Munyang, also known as Montreal. And this past, I suppose, pandemic year, which is a blend of 2 annual years, what has happened? I will probably answer this I will get to answering it, but in a roundabout way, just to say that I also answer in fragments and threads if anybody knows me, and I will wrap it up somehow. The pandemic for me, aside from all the known things that were difficult about it in terms of caring about loved ones and strangers, health, being scared, all of those things, I also saw it as a huge opportunity. For me, there was a lot of hope. I had a lot of hope in it because for me, it was a time that really amplified a lot of my advocacy work. And it gave me space and time to really, as Kala said, have conversations, deep conversations, gathering with people and really checking in. Yeah, quite emotional thinking about it, but to speak to VFR and through the discussions that Cal and I had, it really is, like I said, amplified really things that I really value and things that I felt I was hearing that people needed, which was space, time to reflect. A lot of people compared it to, oh, I'm losing my thoughts right now, but when the ground needs resting before things regrow and things. So I don't have the proper terms for it at the moment. I know it, but I've lost it. Yes, that's it.
Oh.
And so VFR, through our conversations, was really like, oh, what is this? What is it that we want to offer? And that is a word that I wanted to use, was offer. I didn't want to be directing anybody. I didn't feel like I should be telling anybody what to do. It's a very diverse group of artists as well, with their own practices, with their own values, their own needs. Everyone is in different stages. So I couldn't possibly have designed anything to be like, oh, you need to do this, and this is what you're going to get out of it, and this is how I'm going to lead you. And that didn't feel right. So the VFR really centers around listening and offerings. And the offerings are based on what I've heard and what the participants were offering back. And it wasn't always really directed. It wasn't like, oh, I need this. It was, I think I posed two questions in our first Zoom meeting and our only Zoom meeting, which was, what are your needs and what are your desires for this? And people just wrote freely. There was no right and wrong. It was really just that. And that was where I started to gather and read and see what it was that people were speaking to. And then I had the freedom to offer what inspired me through reading those and offering it back. And it was an exchange. And people had the freedom to take in and explore however they wished, whatever spoke to them. And I offered quite a vast different things, because different things like poems, images, music, because you never know what's going to speak to you.
Dinner menus.
So, I mean, that comes back around to, just as Kella said, conversations and discussions. And I see, for me, just like how important that all is, the listening part during the pandemic. There was a lot of Zoom meetings, there was a lot of things, but I felt like there was like a lot of agenda and a lot of information going this way, and not enough space is created for introspection, which was what, for me, the pandemic was offering, because like all these things were off the table now. And we were left with ourselves in our homes.
Yeah.
So kind of leaned into that, which is a part of, anyways.
I read some of the offerings, and they're really beautiful openings with things that are really offering at the start really open kinds of things, and then you are offering very specific things like you could watch this or you can do this. And really, I think it would be lovely to have them published like almost like in a chapbook style, because it's really just reading. I haven't read them all, but just reading them themselves and they're so full. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So full. So you could really had each one was like a smorgasbord of things that you could pick and take off from. So it's like really beautiful. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, as Kella wrote in the chat, it spanned 12 weeks and they received one offering per week, but we left it really, I really wanted to emphasize that, it's on your own terms and on your own time and at the capacity that you have. So yes, there's a lot of things I'm offering, but it's not because you need to read it all, you need to take it all in, or that it all needs to impact you. It's not. It's what I'm offering just so that we have like something that you expect and know that you're getting, but then it's up to you in the time that you have.
Yeah, I think they would really be beautifully put together in a book that you could just refer to over and over again. It's really lovely. Before, should I go back to, do you want to say something, Kalla, or will I?
I'm just gonna
Go on.
say, just that we did thankfully, we're very grateful. We did receive Digital Now funding from Canada Council. We're turning the project into a digital project with the same artists who will come back, and now there's a new practice that we're introducing. So we're really excited, but we're still figuring it out of what the digital phase will look like. But again, keeping with the spirit of VFR, and again, allowing the artists to respond in ways that are coming solely from their needs and interests, desires and curiosities, and less about putting something into the world that they feel is fulfilling some other type of mandate. So it's anyway, we're really excited. It's going to happen.
I think it's really beautiful that project will have a life, as it started out as a COVIDed project in a sense, but then it's the fact that it has continuity, because, and I should have said this at the beginning, because I feel like, or maybe I actually did, that so much stuff has changed um, during COVID, but we don't all, or at least I don't anyway, know exactly what has changed and what we're keeping, and are we being forced to keep things that when we didn't have them during COVID, life was a little better. I could hear more birds singing. So at the beginning I meant, and I'll just briefly say before I hand it on to Nate, like, COVID seemed to me, my personal experience of it was in three parts. At first, it was, yes, I was shut down, but I had so many books that I wanted to read. And because Zoom was such a hot commodity, I talked to, Rory in Ireland, and I was working on a project with Thea. So all through all these crazy time zones. And I was working on Thea's project, just the way I should say it, Silvering, and that she bravely refigured for COVID. And so there was all these kind of changes. And also I felt happy to be there seemed to be something that I could get out of this early part. And then all of a sudden we were dealing with Black Lives Matter issues and deaths and rethinking. And for us in Canada, I think it kind of informed what a failure reconciliation is, and how so many needs of our Indigenous peoples or their, I shouldn't say are, that's like not really the right way to say it, but there's so many things that have not been dealt with in terms of the land and the situations that people have been forced into historically and have suffered through. And so that was that part of COVID, but I still felt like I was learning a lot. But then as we came back into kind of the capitalist landscape of the opening up, of the desperation to open back up, and during that period of time, there was no construction. And so I could hear birds singing all day long. And now I can hear beep, 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 as, those, and a lot more construction and tearing up of roads and things like that. And so I think this part of COVID I've found really, really I'm suffering with it, because I fear that the potential of the first two parts just will be, that we will just be going back into this kind of capitalist structure that where we're ignoring the environment and further ignoring things that have historically been ignored and have created desperation in so many people's lives, et cetera, et cetera. So I really think it's cool that the virtual residency, which was beautifully conceived in COVID, will continue on, finding kind of maybe a somewhat different voice. I think we need some things like that. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it to you, Nate. And the question was, what happened this year and where are we now? And maybe if you want to slide that into what can contemporary residencies, curation, programming, and organizing look like?
Right, big questions. Yeah, just introduce myself again, Nate Yaffe, originally from Massachusetts, but have been living in Tiohtià:ke, which is the name for this island where the Kanien'kehá:ka, which are recognized as the traditional guardians of the land and waters around here. But it's also a land known by Munyang, by the Anishinaabe people. And it's a meeting place for lots of people since time immemorial. And like this past year and over the past few years, since I've arrived basically 13 years ago, I do think about what it means to arrive on a land, on a territory, dropping into a community, integrating oneself in the community, and yes, especially this past year, I think things really did crystallize or start to feel very sharp, um, in terms of, yeah, the racial reckoning last summer. George Floyd, the indigenous people here, the Asian community here, and it makes me think about what I just wanted to respond also to what Angie said about when things are off the table. You said off the table, and when things are off the table, like what is allowed to be on the table, um, it made me, for some reason, I've been thinking about um, like professionalism, just the way you started, Lois and Kala as well, and also Angie, just with your vulnerability and, oh, hold on a sec. That's my home phone.
I think that was interesting that ring went off just as you said the word vulnerability.
Vulnerability, professionalism. I can't silence my home phone. I guess I could take it off the hook. Yeah, just rethinking this idea of what is professionalism. I mean, it's a very coded word too. It's really tied up. I think about this a lot with Hanako, how professional protocol is really tied up in structures that support white supremacy, and a sort of institutional barriers. And so I think about what happens when professionalism is like kind of not on the table anymore. You know, I've been to formal Zoom panels by big organizations and they cannot run a Zoom in a professional manner anyway. So it's off the table. And then and then a vulnerability opens up. And then I feel like we can do activities with a different sort of protocol or social agreements, which feel different, and it just shows that there is a way. And I feel like we all knew there was a way to connect in different ways and to create and to collaborate and, you know, make money too. Like we have to make a living. We knew there was other ways, but I felt like we were all allowed to explore these new ways once professionalism was kind of off the table. And I'm going to put also production cycles in there too, and this idea of artistic excellence. The first thing I did, my first experience of this pandemic was a lot of things canceled, including some exciting professional things that I really put a lot of value on. Although now I'm really learning that was kind of like an inherited value system where, you know, in this milieu, you learn to value each other and value yourselves based off of like how well known you are internationally or something, or like certain name recognition, or, you know, that's that whole system. So that was gone, and I was asked to reinvent a work for online, to be online, and I kind of shut down. I was like, no, I can't do that, and I just wanted to like disengage, which I ended up re-engaging, but in a different way, being like, well, I'm not gonna like engage in the same way from a disengaged place. I'm gonna do what I can. And I was also on CERB, so I created something without the same sort of economics that I usually do. And it was really tied to a point in time, and I don't think I'll ever do it again, because it was really about that moment in May 2020. And then my life kind of like turned again in terms of engagement when I took this job at the CCOV, which is with Hanako. So we applied together, talking about decentralization. I'll talk about more about that in a little bit, but I really appreciate it because it allowed me to be engaged in a certain way. I feel really lucky to have that opportunity to feel useful. Yeah, so, and it's a curatorial job for community-oriented activities at this, it's called the Center for Creation au Vertigo, and it's a heritage uh, place. Like it was once the studio of Au Vertigo Dance Company, this like flagship Quebec contemporary dance company since the 80s. And then it tried to reinvent itself, or it is reinventing itself as something else which can serve more artists than just one. And I'm kind of in a specific position in terms of curation, because what I do there with Hanako, what we do there together, doesn't necessarily make or break the organization. The main function of this, it's called a Center of Creation, but it really is a dance company that supports the productions of a rotating invited artist who's there for 5 years at a time, and it overlaps. So it allows us a certain amount of freedom, although it's a limited amount of budget, but it's a certain amount of freedom to experiment. So it allows us to take chances, which is great, because when I entered, I brought this idea of organizing versus curating, because curating is a funny word, and I never curated really before. I say it in my bio, which is funny that you read that, because I use the word like purposefully in certain contexts. But I did organize this other event called This Activity Build, but that was the only organization experience I'd had besides my own group pieces before taking this job. And so we talked, one of the first things we did was we asked other curators who we respect and admire to talk to us about what it means to curate. And one of them was Michel Lacombe, who is the curator of Viva Art Action, Viva Art Action, a performance art festival in Montreal. And she says, like, depending on the context, she says organizing. She's an organizer versus a curator, an event organizer. And sometimes, often I find that's more useful to say, because it puts in perspective where it's centered, what we're doing, kind of like what you're all saying as well, like Angie, like asking questions as a starting point. I feel like I come from a place of not knowing, and which is a good thing, not as like an insecurity, but like how can I be like a vessel, or reach out to people and just be kind of there as like a shape, a support shape, or add a shape where to support what's already going on. So just, I don't want to, I can talk in many different directions right now. So I'm just going to like summarize what we try to do, Hanako and I. But a lot of it is supporting what people are already doing. We do different sorts of things, not very many public events. We also had to reinvent everything because of COVID, so we couldn't continue anything that was done by Andrew Tay, the person who was there previously. So we had to invent a whole new slew of programs. But and now I'm even rethinking the idea of inventing, because that feels like generating new stuff. Anyway, there's a whole question within me about this, but what I wanted to say was about really listening, starting from a place of listening to where we are all at, and supporting what is already going on, what people are already doing, because people all have initiatives that they're doing, work they've been doing sometimes for a very long time, and often it's what needs to, it's like, it's the thing that addresses maybe the problem that you're seeing, or the issue that you see needs to be addressed. There is already someone addressing it. So it's just kind of how to do the reconnaissance work of listening to what's going on, and then finding the shape where these things can kind of meet.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's Thanks. That's kind of our ethos that we try to go in with, and it's very humbling. Um, and sometimes also, and then the other big part of it is like the history of the place. So the CCOV has a specific history and a specific position within the different dance communities and artistic communities in Montreal. And there are certain ways it can act, and there are certain ways that it is not the right actor. Um, and so you're not acting as an individual, you're acting as an institution. And like, what does this mean, institution? It has like its own history, its own sense of self. And so that also has to be a part of the equation. So that's kind of just a real summary of what I've been up to this last year. And then your last question was, sorry, about the future.
Yeah, well, I think that you've kind of moved into what can contemporary residence fees, curation, programming, organizing, and dance look like. I mean, we do have that sense too, just because Angie's virtual residency project with Neighborhood Dance Works will also continue on. I'm wondering if you respond as you will, but maybe you could say a little bit about this idea of decentralizing, Nate, and
Yeah.
then I might open it up to, rather than going back to our other panelists, perhaps I'll open it up to people who are here, and they could address some thoughts to the panelists and
Sure.
have a conversation.
I'll say it as like a short proposal that will help. Hold on one second. I'll summarize it in a way that maybe can start the conversation rather than take up all the time. So like one of the things that's interesting about decentralization for me, especially like, well, Hanako and I, neither of us are the curator. And so everything is kind of like through conversation with the team, with the people, and then even with ourselves. So it's not, there's the idea of authorship kind of is off the table in a certain way. It's kind of a shared responsibility, which then changes and frees up how you can act, because I feel like you're all kind of like acting towards the project, but no one is the point of gravity within the project. And it kind of like helps with the ego in a certain sense too. So yeah, and I think anyway, I find it very generative as well, and it helps with this idea of reaching out to what people are already doing. And actually, I really also wanted to say one other thing, which was recently I've been really wondering about the role of one curator who is asked to invent like a slew of programs or a season or things recurring year after year versus people who are responsible for one initiative who maybe can then apply it in different ways. Like Angie has been developing this really wonderful initiative with Neighborhood Dance Works. And then what happens after that? And I'm really just imagining like this idea of a freelance organizer, curator that can, it's a question I have, that can bring their series, because it takes practice too. Like you do something once and it's kind of a rough draft, and then you do it again and it starts to grow. So yeah, how can we support this sort of type of curator where it's really an artist who mostly what they do is create art, but then also creates an initiative that's a curatorial thing. And it seems like a better balance in terms of my sense as an artist to be in charge of maybe one or a few initiatives that I can grow with over time. and maybe interact with different organizations and institutions. This is like a kind of half-formed thought in my head that I want to bring to this panel. I would just use the example of Short and Sweet, of what Andrew Tay and Sasha Kleinplatz have. They've done Short and Sweet in collaboration with many different organizations and self-produced. And I don't know, I've been thinking about this as I'm trying to reconcile like my art practice with this more salaried job. Anyway, I hand over the mic.
I'm Angie. Before I pass it out to everyone else that's here, I'm just, because I don't know you well, I don't necessarily know what your micro expressions mean, but did you have something that you wanted to add before I see what Thea, Kathy, Lori, Pat, Ted might want to say?
Oh, I might have done some expressions because I had some hard time hearing at one point.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a bit of a delay. Do I have something to add right now? I think I just need to gather my thoughts for a second before I speak. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got such a small group. I don't know if you want to put up your hand, your Zoom hand, or just if you want to put up your regular hand and let us know if there's something. I mean, we haven't gotten to the question of what are the next right steps, but we're at 3:35. So maybe I thought it might be nice to hear some of your voices, Thea, Kathy, Lori, Pat, and Ted.
Lori has her hand up.
Oh, okay. I thought she was just flirting with me.
Oh.
Lori.
Thank you everyone for speaking from that place of this, what it felt like a really vulnerable, embodied place. And one of the threads that I see and that I experience with Kala in the way that of engaging with artists and community and in whatever the role is, but especially we're talking about this curating. There's this real ethic of care that's present in each of your work. And I really, really love naming of not knowing as a place to start from, as almost really as a value almost, and creating spaces and this use of the word vessel for what is emerging in these spaces, or these relational spaces, sometimes physical spaces. And one of the things that I think about has to do with how we've come through this time where there's been this atmosphere of threat that has been so high, and because it's so novel and we don't know what it is, we're these organisms that are responding with a sense of not feeling safe. And each one of you, especially at Angie, what you were, the way, the tenderness that you were bringing to each artist, not imposing, but trying to make space to nurture and I feel create a sense of safety for the artist. And I just really loved that value coming through this panel.
Thanks, Lori. Thea, Kathy, Ted, Pat, would someone like to make a comment?
No.
Kathy?
If you can hear me, can you hear me? Okay. I'll just be brief because I'm coming from far away, but it's really moving to hear you it's very, very, very reassuring. I feel like here, it's like being in listening to you, it's like being in this really torrent of a river, and there's this rock there that we can gather on. And here there's been, I can hear what you're saying, but there's been such a pressure to just carry on as if nothing's happening, which I find more frightening than anything at all. The denial in that is incredible. And so really I'm touched by people who are saying, no, I don't want to engage here. Wait, we need to have conversations. All of this is so rich for me. And this has been a discourse here, but at the same time, in a very big city, and perhaps it's something I would say, it may not be that important what I'm going to say, but I would say because in Paris there have been terrorist attacks, and it's very important to carry on and be there. And suddenly people wanted to have the same way of reacting with the COVID situation, and it's not the same. It's not the same question. So there's a lot of tension about that. And I'm just so loving hearing you speaking it from a very real place, and such an accepting place. And like has just been said by Lori, nurturing the artists, because here we have an expression called non-essential workers, and the artists are all made to feel non-essential. So this is very beautiful to hear. I'm only speaking from one small point of view, but I'm loving hearing what you have to say.
Beautiful, Kathy. Thank you very much. Thea, Ted, Pat. Thea, are you making a move there?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I mean, again, I'm just going to echo what has already been said in the kind of sort of a reworlding in a way through the kinds of tenderness and attention to the kinds of words that we use and the ways and how we engage with the structures that we have to engage with, and then also moving into those spaces of trying to trouble those structures. And as Angie so eloquently put, how this particular context opened up a space. And, you know, my deep desire is that, you know, that space doesn't close now. And we all feel it, you know, so I'm pulling all of these threads, like the urgency to reprofessionalize ourselves is incredibly strong. And we can't also be naive that we ever really within this context escaped the way that pervasive neoliberal capitalism kind of inserts itself into almost everything that we say, do, eat, look at, engage with, but that we can, and this notion that Nate also talked about, which is also a kind of not knowing, and I don't even know what he means when he says it, but it was in regards to this idea of a shape shifting or finding a shape. So I think of an institution as already having a shape. And so this way of engaging with artists that's about making a shape together somehow in and through the projects that we engage in, it made me think about like dramaturgies of shape somehow in our practices of making and engaging with makers. So it means so many different things, decentralizing this idea of moving away from the kind of one curatorial sort of vision, this sort of perspectival kind of Cartesian thinking to more relational ways of inventing new worlds, I guess. Like, and how can we do that? And And I'm just very touched because I see Nate and Angie and Kala doing this.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I'm just echoing now already what has already been said, but I'm very proud. I'm feeling a lot of love for these amazing people that I have in my life and inspired by you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Thea. Ted, would you like to say something or ask a question? Or
No, I've been enjoying listening very much. That's about all I'll say. Although I will say this, I'm teaching at the university this week, past week and next week. And I'm amazed at the people that the students that I'm working with, the people I'm working with. But I'm very disappointed in the institution of the university. It's so complex. It's so anyways.
centralized?
So centralized, yes. So I've been sort of instigating a little bit of tension with these people, which is great. It's great fun, but also we've been asking a lot of questions, and it's good. We're having a great time, but we're going at it, creating and doing all this stuff. But anyway, it was a big revelation for me. That's all I'll say.
That's beautiful.
Anyways, thanks for this beautiful talking. People
Yes.
put words together in a very wonderful way in this little panel. So I'm
Yeah.
enjoying it. Yeah.
They're a really interesting panel because they're very diverse in the way they think, but or the way that they speak about what I'm talking about you guys in the third person, the way that they say what they're thinking, but it's all together. Looks like. Pat, I don't know you, but did you want to say anything? It's hard to know on Zoom how long to wait because sometimes it's really difficult to get your Zoom going, but I'm going to come back to Angie, Kala, and Nate and ask the question, what are the next right steps or the next right step? What's the next tiny step we can take? So I'm gonna ask Angie first.
Yeah,
You knew that, right?
I wanted to speak. I'm just kind of pulling at the threads and the things that I've been gathering, and things that I've been really thinking a lot about. As I said, this time has just amplified a lot of things for me. These are things that are deep, things that I've advocated for and valued. And so, sorry, all that to say is, oh, I'm sorry, this is a couple of things, so it might not be
Take your
super
time.
altogether.
Good. I'm here, just.
I think we need to continue listening and recognizing that and this has been spoken already in this group, naming that there are people and groups out there that have been advocating and working hard and have been asking to be listened because they for change, and those people have done a lot of work. I'm talking about, the disabled community. I'm talking about racialized communities. I'm talking dreamers. People have been working on change. And so it's almost like, can we make space for new leadership? Instead of the people, myself included, I'm always like, is this a place for me to be a leader, or should I be stepping aside because there's somebody else that's been doing this work way longer, much better, I can support them in that way. So that's one step that I was going to say. And then the other step that I feel is, and I'm a big proponent of choices, and this is one of the things that I've, maybe it's simplifying or oversimplified, but when I hear, you know, like the university, I like think about the granting system, I think about, you know, all these things. And for me, the link is there seems to be this idea that there's only one way and one right way. And it's like, if we want change, we need to go to the opposite or something. And I truly believe in something that Ted and I have talked a lot about, and the value of like, not everything is meant for everybody. So expanding that idea of just like, we need to make space or recognize that there actually is space for many different things. So different ways of curating, different institutions, like, I don't want to take anything away from anybody. I think early on in my advocacy I was very binary in my thinking of being like, oh, this is bad and this is good. And actually, if someone finds value in this, who am I to say that it's not valuable? You know, whether it be the type of dance, whether a type of work that people are making, I don't need to like it, but it's speaking to somebody. So in that way, when I think about, yeah, just right now, like Nate was saying, you know, like decentralizing, it's like, yeah, we can have some places that are, you know, you want to have that one curator because you really like want to support them. They have this great vision. Cool. But not every place needs to follow that stance. There's not one perfect way. There's so many different ways. And like, imagine how amazing everything would be if we gave that space to the multiplicity. Like, that's what's exciting to me. Giving the space and seeing and dreaming, and like, you know, I think about schools and just being like, no, you can go to dance school and you don't have to be a dancer. Who knows what you can be? Who knows what you can create? That's what's amazing. Like, when are we going to start championing that? Like, I'm off the rails now. So I'm going to stop.
I love it. Personally. Yeah, I feel like in the 80s, we were often having discussions with Canada Council about standards of excellence, and especially in the regions. Ted and I also have talked a fair bit about this. It just really had no, it really was something to kill off creation that was happening in the regions. And so we would talk a lot about that. And I think these ideas of decentralization, of relationality, everything that you just said, Angie, it's like so powerful to me. It's like drawing like this line back to what we didn't even understand exactly what else that we wanted, but we didn't want that. And for us on the islands, or disability, people in disability communities, it excluded them. It just said, you know, I use disability as an example. You can come and be in the audience. We've made that possible for you, but don't get up on the stage, you know, talking about your disabled experiences, because we've actually made it impossible for you to get on the fucking stage. Excuse me. Yeah, anyway, sorry, you just kind of upset, you kind of, got me overly enthused now. So that's, it's good for me, but maybe not so good for being the panel leader. Okay, so Nate, I'll just pass it on to you. The question was, what are the next right steps that you can respond?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I'll also respond also to what you're all talking about. Like, yeah, it made me think of something like when you asked me the question about like, what do you mean by decentralization? Like, I didn't have words, but there is something that, you know, in what Angie was saying too, is like, it's not about looking for collectivity. It's not collective. It's not consensus. It's not, that is so draining. And yes, that has a place, like to do like collectives, but you cannot always be doing collectives, or else you will be completely burnt out immediately. But like, how can we have plurality where people can like just, you know, um, like be strong in their own trajectory without having to constantly compromise. And so for me, when I think of decentralization, it's this kind of like ever shifting thing where, you know, for example, you know, with Hanako, we do a lot of partnerships with other curators. And I mean, in the end, we kind of follow their lead a lot. I mean, we're still doing a lot of like the practical side of things. So it's a lot. We're doing like the supporting, like lifting it up, and we you know, we have some artistic guidance as well. But I think about yeah, how leadership. You also said leadership, and I've been thinking about how leadership can be really about like this vessel idea, or like can be creating like the literal room, like the house, but you don't notice the room. Like you're not the focal point. You're just the pillars that allow for the thing to exist and to feel like a home and to feel like comfortable and adapted to whoever you're inviting in. So when I think of curation as like that sort of leadership, also curation, you mentioned like care. And that's one thing that Andrew Tay said to us, like the foundation of the word curation is cura and care, which I think about a lot. But how can leadership almost make itself background and do the part that like that is that other people are not necessarily skilled at, like one thing that, for example, someone in my position at the CCV might have is like the know-how of the logistics and the position to like instigate something, which is not necessarily something the artist wants to like have to, you know, crank up. And we ask artists a lot to be skilled in things that they're not skilled in, like self-promotion, etc. So how can leadership kind of address all that, rather than kind of be like, this is my vision, or this is my, and now I'm kind of rambling, but those were my thoughts about it. And so it's like something about collaboration without collectivity. Because collectivity is like it's just like inertia, like major inertia. It's a huge question. So I'm like, maybe it's like this collaboration with outside curators. Maybe it's like full on inviting a curator to come in and just do their one thing that they do really well. Or I don't know, to avoid all these like learning curves and redundant work and skills upgrades and stuff like this that you don't necessarily need to do. I don't know, I'm putting that out there.
You're covering a lot of stuff there, but it's great. It makes me think a lot about the way of viewing things, the island way or the archipelagic way of viewing things as little islands of difference, all but trying to find a network or a little way of connecting them. The roads are not often built because we just have the super highways into what's ever popular in an urban center, and then that really doesn't allow us to think as divergently as we think that we do. So yeah, when Angie replied to me about how she might talk in this panel, she said like that she's probably going to talk in a way where the sentences aren't finished, and maybe there's just an idea or just a thread or you know, something unfinished. And I really think that this is like just the best way to talk right now. If we don't talk this way, we'll rush to finishing something and it won't be what we wanted. because we didn't stop to look around on the way to wherever it is we're going, you know, and we won't bring all the people that we want to bring with us. So that's kind of what I got, a little bit of what I got from what you said, Nate, although you just covered a lot of territory. So we're getting pretty close to the end here, and I want to hand it back to all the words that are coming to me. I'm like, I can't say those, but I can say them as a joke. To our chief, our leader here.
Oh, God.
I guess I shouldn't say that word. You know, I'm a bit old and I haven't quite, sometimes I can't check myself before something comes out, but I just mean our Cal has provided so much beautiful leadership during this time. And yeah, so maybe it's really appropriate for you to have the last.
Okay. I'm going to try to speak succinctly. So a couple of things that have come up. I really appreciate everybody saying so many things, and a lot of things that were already things developing in my head that you have so beautifully helped to complete my half thoughts in my head. Like, I'm like, yes, I'm writing this down. This is things I've been, you know, on my walks in the morning. So some of the things that I'm thinking about, what is needed from like an NDW standpoint, like right now, I want to take the time that I have at NDW and be responsible to the organization and to the community and to the artists, to do the very best work I can do to tend to the environment and to the garden that we've been tilling. Thanks be to Kathy and Lois and Lori and so many other community members who have shaped this organization over time. So my job right now is to continue to think broadly, but with very specific focus where needed. And so I'm doing that, and I'm constantly questioning who have I not spoken to? Like, who in the community am I missing? Who do I need to listen to? How can I stop talking more and let more people speak? How can I let there be more people around the table? And how can we foster a space where this organization truly feels owned by the community in a way that it is just brings kind of an agency to the expanding environment. That's a very grandiose statement. But so I've been working, like, for instance, we've been working over the last 5 months, developing a proposal that we brought forward we receive funding to do a strategic process. Like, I really don't want to do the things that I'm expected to do, like do a strategic plan on how to improve our operational functions. I'm like, that's fine, we can do that. Our operations are good. Like, I'm not going to say that we couldn't use a help writing some policies and things, but I'm like, no, I'd rather focus our energy on how we're going to expand the curational environment. How are we programming and who are we inviting into that process? So we just did this 3-month process with Sadira Rodriguez from BC to establish an associate curator role for an artist who identifies as a racialized artist. And it's for a local artist in the community, so we can really begin to nurture somebody here on the ground, even if they themselves don't maybe have all the tools yet to embrace that role in a way we might expect. We really want to create a space where they can come in and find their way and help us define what this role is and how it can change internally in a thoughtful, meaningful process, how we're working. So this is a new position. And also there are other things that we're having conversations on the internal side about, like, how are we diversifying our board? And, you know, a lot of people our board's not diverse at all. We're all white settler individuals at the moment, but we, rather than panic and be like, oh my God, you know, we just go and start grabbing people. We're like, our HR staff environment has really shifted, and we have like really strong representation right now of diverse individuals. And I feel like, but this is affecting the kinds of conversations we're having at the table every day in a way that I find so meaningful. In a way, when I was working with my like other white staff, you know, who were super talented and we were getting jobs done, but we would have conversations like with my previous festival coordinator, for instance, conversations would just come to they would not resolve themselves. And now that I work with Santiago Guzman and our communications person is from Mexico, we have conversations that I feel like I can't abandon the conversations too early until we really resolve what it is we're talking about. And I always found it easy to just sort of go, we'll get to that with my white colleagues. And now I'm like, no, I can't just say we're going to get to that. And I also am talking to people about the value of my artistic relationships, no matter who the individuals are, whether they be white, settler, racialized, that the people who feed me or feed this organization and feed the community many of them are white settler individuals. And I value them, and they have relevance, and they have importance, and they have significance. So the conversations about these shifting environments are not to exclude them, but to shift the way we are integrating or purposefully and with intention, bringing new people to the conversation and making sure that we're making space, that we don't fall into habits, that we don't return to just a way to continue moving forward because it's familiar. And many of these people, including people in this room, are people who support these values and actively are engaging in how we're shaping these changes. So I guess I would just say, like, for me, what's next is just continue to listen, take the time needed to work at the pace of trust, and to be there where we need to be to make decisions that are right and that are grounded and that are responsible to the people that we are seeking to support. And then from there, let the artistic work come and be nestled within that.
Thank you, Kala. We're at 4:06, so to be continued. That's, I'm quoting Uncle Val at the end of his play. So thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty devastating day for me, and it's actually been wonderful to be here with such a thoughtful and articulate and open souled, I was going to say open mind, but I think in a way also with such open souls. It's just really been a privilege, and thank you very much, guys, for coming, everybody for coming.
You guys, I want to give you a big hug.
Thank you, Lois, and Lori, for helping to develop the Performative Inquiry Group as a part of a neighborhood dance work initiative, and also the amount of time that you take to prepare these conversations and to prep the space is truly valued and appreciated, and I'm really enjoying this work.
Yes. It's been an interesting journey for us, because what we started out doing is really the opposite of talking and recording and really even thinking at all. So it's been wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You.
Have a good sleep. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for the opportunity to meet you all too, like Lori and Kat and Ted. It's been really nice.
Yeah,
I
beautiful to see
had
you
my
all.
stick on just before we started.
What's that?
I had this stick. Yeah, here it is. So calming.
Ooh.
And I just now have my laser hands.
Oh, there goes
Um,
Ted.
Going to show the latest stick.
Ooh. Okay.
And with a tiny Ted Robinson performance. Thank you.
Love it. Bye.
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 Bye-bye, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Mwah.
Au revoir. Cheers.